Now, if it wasn't for sugar, ladies, would you not find weight loss so much easier? So much easier to stick to a diet if it wasn't for sugar cravings, carb cravings, which is really sugar cravings. When you think about sugar, you think like powdered white sugar. It's like, no, we don't have a craving for that. We have the craving for what it's mixed into that really lights us up. But if it wasn't for those cravings, life would be a lot easier when it comes to sticking with a healthy eating plan. So today, my guest is the expert on sugar addiction. So she's going to help us all really get over the cravings for sugar that we have and how to avoid eating it and just how to have a sugar detox out of our body. Danielle Davis, a sugar freedom coach and speaker, she is passionate about helping women reshape their relationship with sugar so they can reclaim control over their health and energy once and for all. Having struggled with sugar addiction herself, she knows exactly how difficult and overwhelming the journey can be. Using her extensive knowledge in nutrition, personal experience, and coaching, Dani helps her clients discover a new way of living in which sugar cravings and guilt no longer controls their health and life. So welcome, Danielle, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Karen. I'm so excited to have this conversation today.
And Dani, so everybody knows, is a fellow Canadian and a fellow British Columbian.
Yeah.
We are not that far apart from each other, which is pretty exciting.
We could meet in person one day. We're gonna happen after the winter, after the snow is melted.
Yes. After snow, after COVID, maybe too. Hopefully.
Oh yeah, we might be waiting a while, Karen.
I know. Well, it's so awesome to meet you, Dani, and I'm excited because we're going to be talking about something that I think every single person struggles with. Like I said in the intro, like dieting, weight loss would be so much easier if there was no such thing as sugar and sugar addiction. Because even for me, who I've never had much of a sweet tooth, but it's still there. It still gets in the way. If I get stressed out, the sugar comes in. And it's very hard to resist because our bodies go, give me more of that. Like we're overriding these like built-in mechanisms to eat more of it, right? As hunter-gatherers, we were built-in mechanisms to say, oh, you come across something that's calorically really high, very sweet, your body goes, eat more of this because we don't know when we're going to see it next. But now it's everywhere. So, yeah. Okay. So tell me how you got into sugar addiction because you were an addict yourself.
Yes, absolutely. You know, like most people, and maybe some of you listening are already like, oh boy, this is me. They're calling me out right now. Just know that you're not alone. Okay. This is, you know, I think most people, like I have yet to meet a human being who doesn't have some sort of unhealthy relationship with sugar. Yeah. We all have a complicated relationship with food. I can say that confidently, you know, and it always starts in childhood. I got to say that bold statement. It always starts in childhood. It's, you know, how is food treated, you know, in our household? Are we forced to eat our meal and then get dessert? Like, is it a treat? Is it a reward? Is it, you know, all of these conversations and pieces, you know, around food really start there. And that's where my journey started. You know, I was the picky eater growing up. You know, a typical normal household, you know, my mom cooked, you know, quote unquote healthy meals, but I wouldn't eat anything except white pasta, white bread, and cheese. Like I wanted nothing to do with meat or vegetables or anything with actual nutritional value. I always joke that I grew up on white things. I only ate white things. Like it was just the white diet. I don't know what that is, but like sugar, and except for if it was like licorice, because then it was red, right? But essentially the white diet. And you know, that's just kind of how I went through my like early years of childhood. And my mom, more so than my dad, you know, she was really obviously my big influence as a woman. There's always that mother-daughter, you know, kind of relationship and connection. And she was always very addicted to sugar as well. She would have like the hidden candy drawer, right? And I remember just being around that energy of watching her, you know, hide and sneak, and the shame and guilt around like, you know, overdosing on sugar and you know, causing, you know, her weight gain and her poor health because of that. At the time, obviously, I wasn't aware of any of this. I thought it was just normal living, and We would always have snacks in the house. We had dessert after dinner every day. We had, whenever we did something good, we could go and grab, like, we used to actually make our own like mixed candy bags, and we would like have a whole bunch like stored up. And then when we were good, we could go and grab one. There was just candy left, right, and center. And no doubt I was addicted to sugar from a very young age. And the Coles notes of my story, is that, I went off into university, eating like a typical university student would. I was exercising, so I wasn't gaining weight. So I didn't really know there was a problem. And everyone else around me was drinking on the weekends and eating pizza and pasta and ice cream every night, like, but once in a while I'd have a salad, and I went to the gym. So I was good, right? Like it was all good. And I played soccer, so I was active, like, everything was okay. There was no problems. And I wasn't really thinking about it as a young adult. I wasn't really thinking about what I was putting in my body other than kind of what I'd assumed was healthy from, like, I guess I should eat some vegetables and some things here and there, because that's, apparently what the world thinks is healthy. And, I went off after university. The real like turning point for me started when I went out into the workforce, and I actually worked, I actually have my degree in finance. For those who don't know this is my old life. I actually worked at one of the biggest banks here in Canada, in a small
Wow.
office setting. Yeah, TD Bank in the.
Oh, it's my bank.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I no longer bank there for emotional traumatic reasons, but I'm sure they're a great bank. I'm sure they're great. Only because of my experience. Nothing to say bad about the bank. I don't know if they're good or not, but yeah, unfortunately, the environment that I worked in was one of the most toxic experiences that I've had in my life.
Oh.
And the people, the environment, the culture, I mean, being in big organizations, it's very common to just feel like a cog in the wheel, right? And there was a whole tornado of things just in the environment that I was in, with certain people, with the workload, with not feeling respected and being talked down to, and just a whole bunch of things that really started coming at me fresh out of university, really excited to take on the world and help people with their money, which is like what I thought I was going to be doing. And that environment really put me in a state of depression and anxiety and really, really, really deep discontent with my life. And I didn't really know what was going on at the time, but I do now. I can look back with hindsight. I would come home every day, and my husband had a similar experience. He was in sort of a different office, but a different company, but also not happy, not enjoying what we were doing. We thought it was going to be fun and amazing. And we had all these images of what it was going to be like to wear high heels and be important and like help people with their money, right? This whole like image I had in my mind of that must be what success looks like. I'm going to be making money and it's going to be great. And I really just caught myself every day. I would come home exhausted, late from work, totally wiped, mentally, emotionally, physically. And my go-to was to, make something crappy for dinner, like pizza or pasta, or get takeout, just because I had no energy to cook anything remotely healthy. I would grab a glass of wine, I would grab the Netflix, and I would go into the bath. And that's how I would spend my evenings. I would be like the trifecta of numbing out. Like I was just totally wanting to escape any emotions, like to quote unquote decompress after a long day. And it was like I had all the things. It was the Netflix, the wine, the crappy food, and then there was like, the dessert after that, the candy or whatever I was having, the ice cream. And it was just my body trying to give me a dopamine hit and trying to avoid the truth of what was really going on in my discontent with life. And that obviously affected my relationship, because my husband could see how unhappy I was, and we weren't connecting because we were both just so wiped at the end of the day, let alone the fact that I was on a sugar roller coaster. So I was, crashing at the end of the day from my sugar high. So all of that combined, was really, the catalyst. Unfortunately, I mean, it took us 2 years to really realize like there has to be more to life. We've got to get out of this. So that was our first for both of us, big leap of faith and trust in there has to be more. And we decided to quit our jobs. And we actually went and traveled in South America for a year. So we spent a year, we're like, we're going to learn Spanish. We're going to travel. We're going to go find ourselves. Like the classic story of like, there has to be more.
I did it. Yeah.
Let's go figure it out. Right. And it was obviously, it was a life altering experience in so many ways. And coming home after that trip, actually 3 weeks before we came home from that trip, we were eating like junk the whole time, things that we could take with us on 30-hour bus rides, anything in a package. We were still eating the junk, obviously in the Andes Mountains, a lot of potatoes, a lot of rice, a lot of like fried foods and things. And towards the end of that trip, we spent 2 weeks at a yoga retreat center in the middle of the Colombian jungle.
Wow.
And it was the first time in my whole life I've ever been in a situation where we were completely eating off the land. So there was no road to where we were. It was like a trail. You had to hike for like 2 hours. Like we were in the middle of nowhere and living off the land. And that's where, in hindsight, I look back and I laugh because that's where I went through my sugar detox. And I call it my accidental sugar detox because I didn't know what was going on. I was like, what is happening to my body? All of a sudden I wasn't eating any processed food or oil or chemical. It was all like vegetables and whole grains, and like I think it was pretty vegetarian or vegan at that time, but it was still like such a shock to my body. And I remember having the headaches. I remember feeling tired at weird times. I remember waking up in the night hungry, even though I'd just eaten. Like I had digestive problems. Like I just remember for a good week of that being like, what is going on with my body? And
all that fiber.
Yeah, all the good fiber, right? And of course there was only outhouses. I won't even tell that story. But that was not pleasant. Let's just say that.
No.
So fast forward, 2 weeks later, we came back to Canada, and I had this whole list of things that I wanted to have when I got home. I was so excited to like have a bagel because I hadn't had a bagel in a year, and Starbucks caramel frappuccino, that was on my list. I think licorice was on my list because there's no licorice in South America apparently, or there wasn't back then. So I had all these like candy things on my hit list. And I remember coming home, and because I'd gotten off sugar for, I think it was about 10 days or so by the end of it, and my taste buds had completely changed and my cravings had gone away. And I'd never, like, obviously I didn't intentionally go into that experiment, but I'm so grateful that it happened because it gave me enough contrast to realize that, wait a second, like sugar actually had control over me. And as somebody who loves control, that was kind of my type A personality. I was like, wait a second, like something is like controlling my decisions and it's not me, and that's not okay with me. So that was actually one of the sparks for me. I was like, what is going on here? I'm not actually in the driver's seat. And I also noticed that things that I wanted, like that caramel frappuccino or that bagel, I didn't want them anymore. And when I did try to test the waters with those things, they actually tasted disgusting. I was like, what has happened to my mouth? Like, what is going on? So that was the big like eye-opening moment for me when I had that contrast of like, wow, something is going on here. What is it? And I started really diving into that for myself and understanding that I was not nourishing my body in a way that was going to help me live a long and healthy life. And one of my big motivators is looking at my family lineage and my genetic history, like my predispositions for every chronic disease. Everything from my grandpa died from heart disease. I never met him. He died before I was born. My grandparents both died from cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's, like all of it is in my genes. Yeah. And I really started looking at my mom and her state of poor health and her mom and realizing like, wait a second, that's my future if I don't do something about that. So it really just kind of woke me up and realizing, and I'm so grateful that, it was at an early age where, I didn't wait for that stuff to happen. I know a lot of people, please know that it's never too late to make that change, but I'm really grateful that I kind of woke up to that in advance. And I said, wait, like, if, can I change that genetic lineage? What can I nourish myself in a different way so that I don't get all of those problems when I'm old? So I can be hiking when I'm 90 and traveling the world, which is a goal of mine. So really, getting clear on what I wanted out of life and that just kind of took me on a whole adventure of, obviously healing my own addiction with sugar, which was a really, really bumpy 2 years at least before I felt like I was back in control because I had zero support. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know anyone else was going through this or that I, could reach out for support. So I just had to trial and error, figure it out myself. And, in that time, starting my business as a nutrition coach and trying to navigate all that. So it was a very, very crazy 2 years, but so incredibly rewarding. And obviously now that's my passion, is helping women not take 2 years, to build that healthy
Exactly. Yeah.
relationship with sugar, where they can feel empowered and feel back in the driver's seat, so that food's no longer controlling them and, robbing them of their every thought, every single moment of every day. So, and their energy and everything else that it robs you of course, which I'm sure all your listeners are familiar with. So that's the short story.
Yeah. I love it. I was a big traveler myself and traveled all over the world, and yeah, interesting. But the
Eye-opening.
bathrooms,
Really eye-opening.
you're right about the bathrooms. Gosh, I could do a whole podcast episode on just the bathrooms I experienced in my travels. Not that anybody would want to hear about that.
I'll listen to that episode, Karen. I'll listen.
Thanks. So if you were to look back on your 2-year journey, was there a one thing or a couple things that really stand out for you that seem to help you the most get over your sugar addiction?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Yeah, when I thinking back on it now, there was lots of pieces. And I think one of the biggest things that supported me in that was my commitment to learning more about myself, like my new addiction to personal growth, and really diving inward into what's going on the inside. What are some of the inner pieces that I need to heal and work through, and where is that showing up for me, right? Learning to set healthy boundaries, reflecting on my people pleasing tendencies, really getting clear on obviously what I wanted out of life. A lot of this inner work that I started doing during that time was extremely important and supportive for me. The second thing I would say as well, and this is one of them, I'm sure we'll talk about this later, one of the 3 keys to sugar freedom that I talk about is community. And that was a big part for me. It's during that time, as I started getting healthier, being, wanting to eat real food as opposed to the junk that I used to be eating, I naturally started, and I was actually in a new town when we got back from that trip, we moved. So I was making new friends, and these new friends became my community, and we would get together and have potlucks, and everybody would make something healthy, right? At the time it was the quinoa salad phase and all that stuff, right? So everybody wanted to eat whole real foods as well, and I was like, oh, this is great. I had that support from other people who wanted to go for a hike or eat healthy food. And I forget who says that, right? That we're the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with.
Yeah.
Do you remember who says that, right? That's a famous
I know that
quote,
Tony Robbins
so
always talks about you become the people you hang around with.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a big piece for me as well.
I never thought about that actually.
Yeah. So if it's a big difference if if I continued hanging out with my old friends, we get together and just eat pizza and play, watch movies together, versus getting together with friends that want to go for a hike and then have a healthy potluck and play games. It was quite a different energy, right? And a different support for who I wanted to be, and the way that I wanted to, look after my body. So that was a really big piece for me, finding the right people, which wasn't easy. It takes time, right? It takes time to build new connections, but finding your tribe, right? Finding those people that get it, that don't judge you, especially for something like getting off sugar. There's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of shaming, a lot of guilting, a lot of that stuff out there. And I know for me, that wasn't my family. My family wasn't going to be my tribe, and that's okay. I had to work through a lot of that. Why aren't they there to support me? Why are they trying to make me eat cookies, right? So they weren't going to be my support, and that's okay. So I had to find other people that were, and that was huge, and that was really important. Not doing this alone. I think that was why it took me 2 years. I mean, there were so many reasons, but really trying to figure it out on my own was just a recipe for failure. I don't know if you've had that experience. Anybody can relate. I mean, we somehow in our society, we idolize trying to do things on your own. For some reason, we think it makes us tough or cool,
especially women. Yeah. Well, no, men too. Men can't ask for help ever.
So, totally. Yeah. For some reason, we've forgotten that we're social creatures, and we're supposed to raise kids together and support each other and gather by the river and do laundry together. We're supposed to do things together, not struggle on our own. And we need to start, this is a call for all of you listening or watching, to stop idolizing doing it on your own, because you're actually not stronger by doing that. You're
being a
your
martyr.
Power away. Yeah. And you're being a martyr. Yeah. So the best advice anybody could ever give you is just whatever it is you're struggling with, whether it's a relationship or with sugar or with whatever, don't do it alone. have your
Yeah.
girlfriends by your side, hire a therapist, work with a coach, like do what you need to do to find your people and get the support that you need. So
Yeah.
you can actually
I
navigate through.
I went through the same thing when I quit drinking 14
Oh
years ago. Like that
yeah.
was same thing where it was like it took me years to stop because the people I was hanging out with, that's
Yeah.
what we did. We drank,
Yeah.
we ate like crap, we
Yeah.
didn't take care of ourselves. And
Yeah.
so to finally take that step to actually stopping, I had to let go of all those people. And that was really sad because these were my friends of like 10 years,
Yeah.
15 years that I had to go, I can't hang out with you anymore. Like
Yeah.
this isn't real. This is I just want to drink when I'm around you. So I have to go
Yeah.
and I had to make all new friends. But
Yeah.
it's really hard, but it's so huge, that piece of community, of
It
supporting
is. And the
yourself.
right community, right? Like the
Yes.
right community. There's a big, and I know
Find it.
with women, it can be really tricky to, like, one of the pieces that's so important, and I know we're kind of talking about the inner work, personal growth part of it, is being vulnerable. Like, and we
Mhm.
can't do that. Most of us women have been stabbed in the back, talked poorly about by other women, right? We have a lot of trauma around like building friendships or around opening up in front of other women. So it does take, relearning how to trust other women and relearning how to like open up. And obviously, in the right space, you'll feel safe, right? So if there's somebody that you feel really comfortable and safe with, like that's a great indicator that you're on the right track, right?
Mhm.
And to practice kind of building those. So it's
And
so important.
in this day and age, you can find your community. Like there's so many opportunities now
Totally.
with groups and online stuff. And
Totally.
like if I have
Yeah.
a membership group and that's women,
Yeah.
we're all there supporting each other, doing the same
Yeah.
thing, trying to get healthy and take care of ourselves. And
Yeah.
you can find it. There's something for everybody now.
Yeah. And it is really a beautiful, I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people kind of get stuck in like, oh, I can't find that online. And I love hearing that you have a community like that too. I have a few myself, a program that
Mhm.
I run and a membership community as well. And it's so beautiful to watch like how we can create those bonds and we can create that intimacy and that openness and that deep like love and trust and support. And that in itself is extremely healing work as women. Like that is so
Yeah.
important, to heal through and to be a part of that collective. I know for me in my own personal work, it's been pivotal to have that group
Yeah.
of my girlfriends that we do that work together. And you can find that online. I've got actually some of my best friends I've never met in person.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's only been virtual, and we've built such
Same.
a deep bond
Yeah.
that it's like, ride or die, and
Yeah.
we've never met in person. Thank you, COVID.
So let's talk, because you said right at the beginning that most sugar addiction in your experience has come from our childhood. And that for most people is what's, I think, the hardest. Is it's so much easier to go, I'm going to try this new fad diet and I'm going to go to this personal trainer and try this fitness program because that's easy. Someone tells us what to do and what to eat. And women will just go back and keep doing the same thing, which is trying to find the next best diet to get rid of their sugar addiction,
Yeah.
because they don't want to do the work. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that. Yeah. Thank you for asking that. And please know, everybody listening, there's zero judgment here. This is how I used to
Oh
operate. This is
yeah.
how we
Yeah.
all operated. This is how our society teaches us to operate, right? It's like, there's a multi-billion-dollar industry that wants us constantly searching for the next like solution, right?
Yeah. Quick
So
fix.
just know we're up against that. It's like, it's a wonder that you're here opening your mind to other options. That's incredible already.
Yeah.
So when I started working with clients about 5 years ago, I really, especially around this sugar addiction piece, we really focused on like detoxing from sugar. Okay, let's get off it for 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, like feel amazing, like things are great. And what I started noticing really quickly was this pattern of, my clients that would come to me would say, I've tried giving it up 12 times before and it never sticks. It never works, right? Like I keep failing, I keep falling off. And even in the work that we do all this like, detox work and changing your diet and here's your meal plan and all that, like all the stuff that you were just speaking about, right? That's how I used to coach my clients. And I really, really quickly noticed that it would never last. It would never stick. Okay. It would never stick. And I became really fascinated with asking why. Like, what is going on? What is
Yeah.
beyond the what's on our plate and the getting off sugar that's really keeping people in these self-sabotaging patterns? And that's where I really started getting some deep clarity on some of these inner pieces. And now there's a whole list I've got that I go through with my clients, like to figure out what are your foundational pieces. Because I know we were talking about this before, one of the things that I really hit home for people is that the real deep understanding that our relationship with sugar, with food, has nothing to do with sugar and everything to do with our relationship with ourselves. And this is where that inner work comes in. This is where that real inner, inquiry about ourselves and our awareness around what's really going on under the surface. And this is the piece, just like you mentioned, Karen, most people avoid because it is painful and it sucks and it's hard to face your traumas, to learn to feel again. I mean, most of us are walking around not really knowing how to honor our emotions. And when an uncomfortable emotion shows up in our body, we try to stuff it down or give ourselves a dopamine hit with Netflix, Instagram, and a box of ice cream, right? Because yay, dopamine.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been taught, because the emotional conversation is such a huge one. And that's one of the biggest places that I dive into with all my clients, to understand, what's going on under there. What beliefs do we have around showing emotions and feeling emotions, and how can we learn to process those and feel them and honor them as gifts instead of something to be, ashamed of, right? Ashamed of crying or, being angry. I think so many of us women have this, there's this societal belief that women should never be angry, right? Like that we should never, there's a lot. I mean, for all of us, it's kind of a different emotional kind of blueprint or piece going on, but it's something that is so important. And that was really the first eye-opening piece for me when I was working with some clients that just couldn't, there was actually one client in particular that really blew my mind with this, because we met on our first call and I asked her to do an exercise. I wanted her to envision her future. We were going to do a visualization together, and she could not close her eyes in front of me because she felt so terrified of seeing what was underneath in front of me that she physically could not close her eyes and take 3 deep breaths.
Wow.
So she was so guarded because she was terrified to feel whatever was there and whatever was going to come up. And that for me, and long story short, at the end of our work together, she was crying on calls.
Yeah, I bet.
She was like just an emotional, like awesome blossom. Yeah, it was pretty incredible just to watch her take that mask off. And I think most of us live our lives that way, with this like shell over, and it's a protective mechanism from our childhood, from how we needed to survive in our household or with friends, or to fit in, or to be, it's the ego is all there, right? Trying to make us survive and trying to guide us through life, which is a good thing, but it's kind of come out in a dysfunctional way now that we're adults, and we have to start re-looking into some of those pieces around who we think we are. Do we love ourselves? Do we, our limiting beliefs, like not feeling worthy, not feeling like we're enough? I mean, these are some really deep wounds that most of us carry around, and let alone all the trauma that really stems through in how we see the world and how we operate and how we use certain substances. I mean, any addictive behavior really does stem down to a lot of trauma, which we all have, by the way, whether it's big or little trauma, it doesn't matter. It all really comes out in how we show up. So that was, the uncovering. There's a huge list of other things. I know I mentioned, like, people pleasing and boundaries, and we have to do some work around our values. There's a lot of, like I say, foundational pieces that until we get our foundation and connect with ourselves at that level and do some of that inner healing, we'll forever be in the old patterns and habits, right? Like there's new neural pathways that need to form, and we need to really get, connected with ourselves so that from a place of love, we can make healthy choices. And that's where that's where the freedom comes in. That's where the effortless healthy eating comes in. And it's such a beautiful space to be in, in being able to operate from your inner self, being connected with that instead of being disconnected. So there's a huge, like, reconnecting with your body, your emotions, yourself, your what's important to you. And that's a lot of the work that I do. That's obviously so deep. All these
it's so good.
go down as a huge conversation, but that's like
I know. I'm like,
surface
what do I
level.
pick here? All of these things are so good.
Yeah. Yeah. And
We
they're
do an
all, and I
episode
wanted to,
on each one.
we
How do
could,
you
right?
value yourself? You know, do you have
Yeah.
childhood trauma? Do you have,
Yes, we all
but
do.
we're so disconnected. That's, I think, top of the line is that
Yeah.
you have to reconnect because
Yeah.
would you say like at the root of it, we go to the sugar to just make ourselves feel momentarily happier.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've had a lot of clients, anybody listening might resonate with this, right? And I can remember this from back before, before I discovered freedom, but there's like this void that you might feel, like this kind of emptiness or this flatness with life as well, right? Like, I just feel kind of blah, or I feel like disconnected from building new relationships, or my job is kind of blah, and like, yeah, my husband's okay, but we don't really have sex anymore. Like, it's kind of just like this this emptiness. A lot of people kind of describe that either in their chest or in their stomach, kind of that feeling of like there's got to be more. And I went through that same thing and went on my quest, right? Not everybody has to go to South America for a year to find themselves, but it is really that journey of like relearning who you are and coming home to yourself. And it's really hard to explain and understand until you go through that journey, right? And
Mhm.
it's so beautiful, all the clients that I work with finally having that moment where they're like, oh, I get what you're talking about, Dani. I feel it. I can feel it, right? And really connecting again, with ourselves. And for a lot of people, it is that feeling of emptiness, or that lack of, and this is something that I'm talk a lot about, this lack of joy. And I want to mention this too, because
Yeah.
this is a really big one, especially as we head into the holidays, is for most people. And I'm going to say something and it's going to sound harsh, but I want you to acknowledge, if this is you, and get real and honest with yourself, is food your only source of joy, right? Like, is
Yeah.
food and sugar the only source of joy in your day? At the end of a day, that's what it was for me. At the end of my long day at work and that miserable job, like, that was my only source of joy. And it was so heartbreaking to come to terms with that, but at the same time really empowering, because then you could do something about it. You can say, whoa, okay, that's one of the reasons why I can't put the sugar down, because it's my best friend. That might be
Yeah.
how you're describing it, right? It's
Yep.
my best friend. It's the only thing that gives me happiness every day. And that's like, that breaks my heart, to when we realize that, because
Yeah.
it's so sad that we've gotten ourselves into that space. And it's okay to have emotions around that. It is sad, it's heartbreaking, it's all those things, realizing that, if that is you, and then take a breath and realize that, okay, now I can do something about it, right? Because there's so many beautiful ways that we can start bringing more joy into our life, right? Bringing more happiness, bringing more connection with other people into our life. So like joy, love, and connection are often the three I call them the three missing nutrients, because there's something we don't talk about, like vitamin D or
Yeah.
zinc, right? But they're human needs and nutrients that we need on a daily basis. And if we don't have joy in our day, if we don't give ourselves love every day in some way or another, and if we don't have that connection with ourselves and with others, like, we will forever be unhappy and disconnected and stuffing food down our face. So these are some things, especially as we're heading into the holidays, these are the biggest triggers, I think, for most people. It's that connection of, well, the holidays is all about joy, which is all about food,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's the only pathway, instead of, wait a second, is craft night also not really joyous? Or
Yeah.
is going for a hike with my best friends also not really joyous? Like, how about games night, where we get really silly, or building a fort, which, by the way, my husband and I still do, because it's so important to tap into your inner child as
Yeah.
well, and play and have fun and not be serious all the time. So,
Yeah.
whatever that looks like for you, there's just like endless ways to bring more joy into your life. And when you're in a cycle of just sugar being that only joy, it's also kind of altered your state of dopamine as well, right? When
Mhm.
we're on processed foods, I think I just want to say this really quickly,
Mhm.
because it was really eye-opening when I learned, and it can really help people understand, because oftentimes people can feel like, well, if I get rid of the sugar, then there's no joy left. And what's actually happening when we're on processed foods and sugars, our dopamine receptors are, say, operating at like 1,000 or like 10,000, level 10,000.
Yeah.
And the billion-dollar industry wants that to happen. They've actually, curated foods to give us that dopamine hit at level 10,000. Whereas normal things that give you joy, like watching the sunset or cuddling your cat or having good sex, right? Like are like level 100, which is normal dopamine, normal like happiness, but you can't feel it because you're used to level 10,000. So
Oh,
when you
yeah.
get off of the processed sugar, and I don't know if you've experienced this, but when
Oh,
you get
yeah.
off of that sugar, I remember being like, wow, these like just sitting here watching a bunny like hop across my lawn. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. Like it gives me so like I actually feel dopamine. I feel joy like watching those things or watching the sunset or having a nice bath with candles at the end of the night. Like those things that never used to really give me joy now do because my receptors have balanced. So just know that there is
Yes.
lots of joy out there. You might just need to rebalance, and it might take a couple weeks or months to do that. And then you will be experiencing joy if you start looking for it, right? If you start opening your mind to, okay, it's not sugar anymore. What else is out there? And it's just an endless world of joy if you choose to see it.
Yeah, that's such a good thing to bring up because we become numb
Yeah.
to the 100, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't give us joy because we're
Yeah.
so used to 10,000.
Yeah.
And so that's why we'll go and turn to our phones for
Which is
dopamine.
also level 10,000, by the way.
10,000. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll find myself doing that to get a little bit of a hit. It's like, oh, I need to, you know, but
Yeah.
yes, you have to recalibrate your joy.
Yeah.
And so
Joy meter.
your joy meter.
We're going to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had a little aha moment there because once again, I can relate to all this with my alcoholism and drug addiction. And because sugar is just as addictive as alcohol is, I think everybody also needs to realize that it lights up your brain the same way that cocaine does. It doesn't have the chemical addiction like cocaine, but it's got the same addiction, the payoff that you get from cocaine. So it's extremely, extremely addictive. And I read this amazing book about alcoholism, and I actually interviewed her on my podcast. So you guys can go back and listen to this, but it's called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace.
Amazing.
The best stop drinking book I have ever come across. The woman is phenomenal. And she talks in there about, because so when she went on the journey to try and quit alcohol, it was very, very challenging for her. It took her years to finally stop, but she went on a mission and decided she was going to find out all the information she could about alcohol. And she said that she just went through every excuse that everybody has to why they drink and tried to find information to back that. So, same with sugar. Alcohol is the same thing, to unwind, to feel good, to de-stress. And she realized it actually doesn't make your stress levels go down. It makes your stress levels go up. And she proved that to herself by looking at the research and said, no, you drink. The next day you feel like crap because you drank. It lowers your dopamine and then goes down because you had that dopamine high, and then it crashes and then you feel bad about yourself. You're depressed, and then you just want to drink again. And it's this terrible vicious cycle, same as sugar addiction, right? And so she went and disproved all of these things. And when you were saying like you would eat sugar, people eat sugar to numb themselves and to get that joy, that quick hit. But what happens after that? Guilt. Like what woman doesn't eat a bag of cookies and not feel like a bag of crap afterwards and sit there going, I'm an idiot, I'm fat, I'm disgusting, I have no willpower,
what's wrong with me?
I'm a terrible person, what's wrong with me? Why can't I stop? Like it doesn't bring you, it may bring you very momentarily that feeling of, oh, I'm kind of numbed out, dopamine hit, I feel kind of joyous, but very quickly, if not coinciding with the feelings of guilt, shame, I'm fat, I'm disgusting. So really be honest about it and about it with yourself. Does it really bring you that much joy? Is it really helping you to de-stress? Is it really helping you to forget about the fear, the traumas, the childhood shit, whatever it is? Is it actually working and doing that for you? Probably not.
Yeah, that's a beautiful message. So eye-opening when we have to get honest with ourselves. And I love that, she did that research, right? Like we can actually look into it and call ourselves, we're constantly lying to ourselves, right? We're constantly trying to like find the loophole, right?
Yes. Yes.
And yeah, it's so interesting that the program that I'm hosting right now, they're about 2 weeks in sugar free, and they're now having the like those epiphanies, right? Of one of the ladies on the last call was sharing she had some sugar, and she'd never in her life like had such a disgusting physical reaction to food because her body had started to balance out, and then she had the sugar, and that was that reminder of like, holy smokes, like that was horrible, right? That was not worth it at all. And that was such a beautiful tool for her to like obviously continue on and remind herself of, wow, like it's amazing what our bodies can do to kind of acclimate to
Oh,
try to
yeah.
survive, right? Like our bodies are
Yeah.
trying to survive with whatever junk we're putting in it, which by the way is pretty phenomenal. Like our
Yeah.
bodies are incredible.
Really.
Think of all the terrible things you've put in your body and done to your body and experience, and it is still here. Like, let's not forget how magically miraculous our bodies are, that we're still standing and we're still functioning. And I'm assuming you're listening to this, you're still functioning at some capacity. You have
Yes.
ears, right? Um, so like that's pretty incredible, and that also means that our body can recalibrate and rewire, but we need to have that contrast. Like I think for most of us, and myself included, we think it's normal like to not have a bowel movement for 3 days, or to feel bloated after every meal, or to just always be tired at 2 o'clock, right? Like these things I used to think was normal, and then when I went on Whole Foods, I realized, holy smokes, that was not normal. This is what normal feels like. And having that contrast can be so motivating when you realize how good that feels to
Mhm.
like, wow, I can actually have energy until I go to bed at night. That's a thing. Like, I
Yeah.
don't have to be, gassy and bloated after every meal. Like, what? I thought that was just part of being human, right? We talk ourselves into, especially as women as well, like our menstrual cycles, we think that having horrible PMS is a normal thing. And I know you do a lot with hormones, right? And
Yeah.
that's not like these normal things don't mean that they're necessarily healthy just because everyone around you is dealing with it. It just means that we're all out of balance together,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily a good thing.
So, with your experience with working with so many women with sugar addiction, would you say that it's like alcohol where in drugs where if you are a true sugar addict, you got to completely remove it 100%? Or do you see that women can have that kind of 80-20 rule and still enjoy it at sometimes, right? As I'm always kind of for the 80-20, but I have met several people who they just can't. It's like a runaway train. As soon as they start, they're done. So they have to look at it like a true like alcohol or drug addiction.
Yeah, that's such a million-dollar question, because even in the space around sugar, and I'm going to share my view on it,
Mhm.
but please know, everybody listening, this is ultimately what feels right to you, right? Everybody listening or watching, you know yourself best. And I'm not here to tell you what you need to do or what you should or shouldn't do. Okay. And if anybody does, please run in the other direction, because they don't know you and they're not going to be able to support you. So really, this is about, being empowered in your body and learning what's right for you. And I know there are a lot of people, in the sugar addiction space that really do, come from that alcohol, dependency line of thinking, and their research and the things that they found is that there are a certain subset of people that do have very, whether it's genetic or not, right? Very, very addictive personalities and styles. And there's a small, subset of the population that probably does well never having sugar again, right? In my experience, I'm more of, and this is where I talk about sugar freedom, is really the freedom to choose when and how much and to have it. I think, with in my, and again, these are my own beliefs and my own experience over the last 5 years. So take it or leave it. But what I've really seen in my own experience and the hundreds of women that I've supported over the years is when we actually do the inner work, we can get to a place where sugar no longer controls us. And obviously, if our bodies have reset and we've got our physical chemicals under control, right, in terms of the cravings and the driving that, we can also do the deeper work. And most people who say they can never have sugar again, I see really never having completed the inner work, right? A lot of people get kind of dip their toe in and say, this is too hard, forget it. I'm just one of those people that can never have sugar again. And I don't believe that. I
Mhm.
believe that when you actually commit to doing the healing that you need, whether that is, you know, around your emotions or traumas or whatever that is, depending on your unique body, you can get to a place where, you know, sugar and food, because sugar is a bit different, right? Like it's kind of, I know it's not a food, it's not at all a food, but it's kind of like a part of food, right? I mean, it's carbohydrates are a part of food, right? Which I don't demonize whole food carbohydrates myself. I think it's really important, you know, to understand that we need food, and we don't want to create a toxic relationship with food on the other side of things as well. So often when we say like, I can never eat yams again because there's sugar in it, it's like, okay, now we're getting into like disordered eating, but on another angle, right? Like being too obsessed over that can be the same as being too obsessed over, you know, other things, right? So
I agree.
it's really, you know, it is really that mindset game. And I think, you know, when we tell ourselves we can never have anything again, I think it really disempowers us. It really makes us believe that we're broken, or that we'll never be strong enough. Like it kind of just, you know, amplifies a lot of these limiting beliefs we have about ourselves of like, well, I'm just one of those people that will never trust myself, or never, you know, be able to just have one, right? Like, and again, I'm saying this with like understanding there's a small subset of people that probably is them, but I think for most of the population, there is some really beautiful opportunity to heal from within, and that might take years, by the way.
Yeah.
And this is why people never get there. People just say, I'm throwing in the towel, I'm just a sugar addict, I'm never going to have sugar again, I'm just one of those people. And it makes me so sad, because there's so many things that they haven't even looked at. They haven't even healed through. They haven't even looked at their childhood traumas yet, let alone, you know, understanding their identity, or their people pleasing boundaries, right? That keep showing up for them, or how to deal with stress, and, you know, all these things and all these tools that we need to build in order to have that healthy relationship with food and sugar. So that's kind of where I stand. You know, I think that it is a beautiful thing to be able to choose. Yeah, I want to be able to have a glass of wine. Well, I know that's, now we're talking about alcohol, but glass of wine or a brownie, right? And not have it totally derail you, and have it be something that comes from, and I think this is ultimately the conversation we're having, is when you truly learn to unconditionally love yourself, that choice can come from a place of love. Like, oh my gosh, I made this brownie. It's so full of like loving nutrients. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to enjoy every bite of it. And I'm just like, you know, we could take a page from like the French or the Italians. Like, look at how they savor and enjoy food, and they don't guilt or shame themselves for it. They actually like enjoy it in the moment, and they don't overdo it. You know, they manage that in a beautiful way that I think we could learn a lot from. Like, just, I think the mindset piece around it is really toxic when we start getting into then shaming ourselves if we accidentally have some salad dressing with sugar in it. Right. And we're like, and then we're just, well, I'm a failure, right? We just start labeling ourselves, as opposed to it being a choice that can come from a place of like, from love, and knowing, again, this comes with relearning to trust our bodies and learn what our bodies are telling us, right? Maybe there's certain foods that just are no-nos. Maybe bananas always make you want to like have a whole cake, right? Then maybe you just don't eat bananas, right? So maybe there are certain things that you can, and it is one of those the very personal journeys to learn like what works and what doesn't for you, and where you're at, and maybe that involves having to be off sugar for a year while you do this inner work, or maybe it's sooner than that. I mean, it's a very person specific thing, but I do believe, you know, for all of you out there that, you know, are kind of in that space, I believe that there is possibility for you, that you can be one of those people, and you just haven't discovered, you know, where that is yet.
Yeah. And you haven't put the work in. You have to do the work. And it's just, everyone needs to know that it's possible. What she's talking about, it's possible. It took me years for the same thing, just to figure out what works for me, what doesn't, what's the runaway train, what isn't. Like, I try to remove a lot of my carbohydrates out of my everyday meals. You know, I go just whole foods, healthy foods, so that when, like, my husband the other day decided on a Saturday afternoon, he's going to make donuts, fresh homemade donuts. I'm like, what? Really? What are you doing? I said, this is the best day of my life and the worst. I love a good donut. So I was like, of course I'm going to eat it. And I don't feel any shame about it at all.
Oh, I bet it was
because
good.
I have those times where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I'm going to go for ice cream with my kids, or, Halloween just happened. I'm going to eat some Halloween candy and then I'll get over it. It's done.
Yeah,
And
and I think
that's
that's the
how I
beauty
run.
too in remembering that. Like, obviously, it depends on what kind of sugar you would be eating, but your body, if your body is, and I know you talk a lot about hormones, right? Like if your body is healthy and your hormones are balanced, your body knows how to flush out sugar that you're putting in. Like your body can handle it, right? Unless you're obviously throwing in some extra chemicals and artificial sweeteners and all the stuff your body has no idea what it is. But like, ultimately your body can process a little bit of sugar. You're not going to die.
No.
You're not going to get diabetes if you like, have a brownie or have a piece of Halloween
Yeah.
candy once in a while if it's not your everyday, right? I think
Yeah.
the real trouble is in the overdosing that most people are doing just at breakfast, right?
Yeah.
Anybody still eating granola, yogurt, and fruit, I dare you to calculate how much sugar is in that. And then look at how much, is the safe daily amount, and you'll probably be over it for breakfast. So when you're not doing that and your blood sugars are balanced and you're healthy, like your body can really beautifully handle, like it can just process that brownie, right?
Yeah.
And then it's gone and you're good, right? And you're going to be okay. But it's the like chronic overdosing of sugar that's really where all the disease is coming from and all the development of that sort of stuff. So things
Yeah.
like that, right? Obviously knowing your body, you're going to be okay. Like,
Yeah.
and you're fine. You're
Yeah.
good. If it's like the once in a while thing, you're okay. You're
And even
good.
when it comes to weight loss, I'll work with women that'll be like, oh, you know what? I have a square of dark chocolate every day. That's probably why I'm so fat, why I can't lose weight. I'm like, no, you should be able
Right.
to have a square of dark chocolate every single day and still lose weight if you're eating well and your hormones are balanced. And if you
Totally.
can't, there's something else going on. It ain't the chocolate. So
But it's easier to look at the chocolate, right?
yeah, it
It's
is. Yeah,
easier to
way
blame the
easier.
chocolate. Like, it's the chocolate's fault, not something else, because that's painful to look at, right?
Not my belief system, not my
No,
trauma. No,
no,
can't be
no, no,
that.
no.
So tell us about where people can find you and your program that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can head on over to my website. It's danielledaem.com. Daem is my last name. Danielledaem.com. And you can actually I have a free 3-part video series up there right now, all around emotional eating. So that might be a really great place to start.
Yes.
It's totally free. Grab that. And then you can also get on my wait list for my Break Free from Sugar program. That's my 10-week signature program that I'm in the middle of hosting right now, where we dive into a lot of this inner work so that we can create that lasting change when it comes to sugar. We obviously detox from sugar as well for a bit, but we really are diving into a lot of these root causes so that this can stick and this can be a lifestyle change, not just another fad diet.
Yes.
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
So you can get on the wait list. I'll be hosting that again in the new year, and I would love to have you in there. So that's probably the best place. And obviously I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well at Danielle Daem. You can find me there.
And I'll link to all that in the show notes, you guys, so you can go check her out. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to have you on again because I feel like there was a lot more that I'd like to talk about. So maybe in the new year, I'll have you come back on again. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Karen. And for everybody listening to the end, thank you so much for being here. I hope that, you got something out of this, and please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to hear messages from you and your biggest takeaway from today. I love hearing that stuff.
Yeah, same. All right. Thanks so much.